So you're struggling on who to hire for your first or your next bodybuilding coach. Well, I'm here to assist you with some parameters that might make your life a little bit easier in making that decision, so to lessen or reduce the risk that you're going to waste your time, your money, or your health. So I've come up with a list of things that I think are vital in making that decision, and I just wanted to go over them with you. So as of late, I've been noticing that there has been a reduction in quality of coaching, and there's still a lot of good coaches out there. But way back when, 9 times out of 10, I would side with a coach in most disputes. There seemed to be a smaller group of qualified coaches, and the athletes were generally more likely to be the problem. Well, with the rise of AI and Instagram, it's become easy for a lot of these shills to get their name out there, to embellish skill sets, take advantage of clients, or just harm people's health and waste their time. So I wanted to come on here and just give you guys some of the parameters that I consider when I'm choosing a coach. So the first one is checking the receipts. So it's really important that whoever you hire as a coach has credentials, right? I mean, what are you looking to do? So if you are let's just say, a national level female figure competitor, well, you want to hire somebody that's done that before, that's put national level figure competitors on stage with success. Now, it would be silly to hire somebody who's never had a figure competitor before, right? Same thing if you're a super heavyweight bodybuilder looking to crack a pro card, well, you probably want to hire somebody who's dealt with some bigger guys before, not somebody who's never put a male on stage before. If you're an enhanced client, you want somebody with experience in the enhanced realm, someone who can read blood work, someone who can solve problems, someone who can, articulate cycle design and do it safely. So having the receipts to demonstrate mastery is very important. In this day and age, part of the flaw is that a lot of, less qualified individuals are able to embellish their qualifications. However, it's pretty easy to find, all the big name local coaches that are qualified, what they've done. They post their clients are posting themselves, and it's pretty easy to kind of figure out who's doing what. I also find it important that when I'm hiring a bodybuilding coach, whether that's male and female divisions, that they've done it before. I personally, and this is maybe just a preference of mine, I couldn't fathom hiring somebody who has never stepped on stage before. I just can't fathom someone being able to get into my headspace when I'm 2 weeks out and doing 2 hours of cardio or struggling in a certain way, and the person steering that ship has absolutely never felt that before. So one of my credentials is definitely that the person that I'm hiring as a coach has competed before. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have been on the Olympia stage or had a pro card, because as we all know, genetics vary. There's plenty of top name coaches in the industry right now that were mediocre at best, and they've brought people to Olympia titles. So it doesn't necessarily have to mean that they were Ronnie Coleman's stature on stage for them to be a good coach. But I think it's important that they, at the very least, are able to relate to you during really difficult times, when you're struggling, when you're hungry, when you're run down, and especially with PED use, when you're feeling a certain way, it's important that they can relate, and it's particularly important in the realm of problem solving. So it's also, as I mentioned earlier, like, pretty easy these days to figure out who's doing what. So, when I say check the receipts, what you can also do is, like, go on this prospective coach's Instagram, see what their clients look like. If you're constantly seeing clients that are showing up soggy and out of shape and looking 5 weeks out, then maybe you don't want to hire that coach. If you're constantly seeing transformations that they're posting, and these clients just look unbelievable, and they're constantly coming home with hardware from local shows and national shows, and maybe turning pro, maybe even on the pro level, then it's safe to say this coach, at the very least, has the capabilities of delivering quality to the stage. So the next thing is that I want people to think about ensuring that their coach and their coach's specialties are in alignment with what their particular needs are. So that could mean that you're a diabetic. It could mean that you're a vegetarian or a vegan. It could mean you have particular injuries. It could just mean you use PEDs, right? Because there are some coaches out there that just coach natural clients, and vice versa. You might be a natural client, and the coach might only have experience with enhanced clients. And As we all know, that's a very different prep, when you're dealing with someone that doesn't have the assistance of PEDs. So I want whoever I'm hiring as a coach and their skill set to be in alignment with my needs. I find that to be really important, especially as a female, right? So if you were a female and you are going to be enhanced, or even not necessarily enhanced, because sometimes, when you get lean enough, you do run into hormonal problems. If I was a female competitor seeking a coach, I would want someone that has particular experience with female hormones and being able to keep them safe and keep things running optimally. Obviously, we all take calculated risks, and that's part of the sport, but you don't want someone that's just going to run you into the ground recklessly. So the next thing is get client feedback. So there's not a respectable coach that I've ever encountered that would have a problem with you contacting their past or present clients. I did it when I was looking for a coach, the last two coaches. I sent clients messages and asked about their experience. I think it's really important because, obviously most of the present clients are going to say good things. They're currently paying the coach, but it gives you real-time feedback on how this coach operates, their vibe, kind of their dynamics with their clients. Although they might vary and they might be different for you, it kind of gives you the ability to check their temperature. And past clients are obviously important, because if you find that, this client says, yeah, I left this coach because he put me on 5 grams of gear. My blood work was trash, and then he made me eat 5 diazides. And that's maybe a coach you should watch out for. But I think checking past and present client feedback is an important part of the process. At the end of the day, it's basically a job interview, right? If you were hiring someone to come work for your company, you would want to interview them and know as much about them as humanly possible. And their clients are a direct result of their work. So it's the easiest pathway to figure out what they're about is to just engage with their past and present clientele. The next thing is, what does their client retention look like? So if this particular coach has clients that have been with them for 5-10 years, whatever excessive amount, and that seems to be a pattern, right? That they're constantly retaining clients, they're doing prep after prep after prep, and they've taken clients from maybe an amateur middleweight stage all the way to a super heavyweight pro card. That's a cool thing to see, because consistency and reliability and these dynamics thriving over time is really what you want in a coach. If you find that your coach has a bunch of one prep, fly by night, one and done type of ordeals, well, it doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad coach. As we know, there's plenty of competitors that they do one show and they figure out this isn't for me. There's also plenty of coach hoppers out there, but it is a data point that's relevant to understand what their client retention may or may not be. The other parameter too is budget. You want to know what this coach has to offer and what it costs, because at the end of the day, bodybuilding is really expensive. We've got food, we've got coaching, we've got gym memberships, we've got lab work, we've got supplementation, we've got travel, hotels, show registration. Bodybuilding is an expensive sport. So if your coach is charging $1,000 a month and that's not in your budget, and it's taking away from your ability to eat food, or it's making you work 2 extra jobs to be able to pay for it, then maybe that coach isn't a good idea for you. It's also important to figure out what that coach has to offer, because budget becomes relevant at that point too. So if your coach offers posing as well, that might save you $60 an hour on hiring a posing coach. If that coach is able to read lab work and is able to, help with your training protocols and your programming, then that's less you have to spend in the long run on contracting other individuals to assist. Now, there's a lot of common mistakes I see people make when they hire a coach, and the first one kind of burns my ass a little bit, and it's prioritizing geography. So, as many of you know, I come from a small town in New Hampshire. In my opinion, I just don't see a thriving bodybuilding scene in that state. I'd love there to be. I love my friends and my fellow competitors in that area, but we're not Southern California. We're not New York City. So there's just not a lot of good local coaches that I would find to be qualified to hire. And that's my personal opinion. But a lot of people, especially new bodybuilders, the first thing they say to me is, hey, Peter, I really want a local coach. And I kind of facepalm and I'm like, look, you really want to find the right man or woman for the job. Point blank, period. Where they live has nothing to do with anything. I mean, we have Olympian winners that are coached by coaches that don't even live in their country. They're not even in their time zone. They don't even speak their language sometimes. And the best physiques in the world are produced that way. Now, don't get me wrong. If your dream coach happens to live next door, then you just hit the lottery. But it shouldn't be something you prioritize. You should be seeking the best person for the job above all else. And a lot of people, I think, don't understand the way this game works. You know, I've worked with several coaches. I've been in this game for a bit, and I've got a lot of experience with friends and their coaching dynamics. And generally speaking, we're all sending emails, checking photos, filling out questionnaires. You know, I've had a coach that lives an hour from me, and I'd go a year without seeing him. Maybe I'd see him at my show, and we built incredible progress working through email. So don't just hire the Joe Blow at the gym, because 9 times out of 10 it's a bad decision. And I just see that as being one of the first catalysts to disaster every single time. Especially in my region, these local coaches are the ones that are over-drugging clients. They're bringing clients in soft. They're looking 5 weeks out and embarrassing themselves on stage. They don't know how to pose. And it's that client that wants to feel the comfort of a coach being local. But what they find is they just end up in the same email process that most of us do working with remote coaches. The fact that their coach lives 20 minutes down the street doesn't really benefit at all in the process. So again, if the coach of your dreams is local, then great, like that's awesome, and I applaud that. But you should always seek the best person for the job and not prioritize the geography. It's just there's always, some prep coach at the gym that's done one local show, has maybe prepped one person in their entire life and it didn't go well, and they're the prep coach, right? And it's like, you don't want to give that person your money. There's just too much riding on this sport, whether it be your time, your health, your money, etc. And an important point to make, and this is kind of to side with a lot of the coaches, when you do find a coach, you really need to give them a year at minimum. It's unfair to expect a coach to make an Olympia, quality physique out of you in one prep. It just doesn't work. They need time to learn your body. At the very least, you got to give them an off season and a prep. They need to be able to do things their way by their processes, and see if they succeed that way. If you're just going to let them do one prep and then say this didn't go the way I wanted it to, but they were a good coach and they did what they were supposed to do, well, that's more on you than it is on them. So it speaks to the importance of the decision, though, because when you're making this decision to choose a coach, you need to bear in mind that you should be committing to this for a minimum of a year. And being that most of us don't have many years in this sport, because it is just taxing physically and mentally, and there is an expiration date on age to some extent, you want to make sure that you're not wasting a year or two with the wrong person. So don't hire the joker in the gym and has no credentials. Make sure you get the person that is in alignment with your needs and they've got the credentials that you desire. And the next one is don't pick the biggest name, right? I mean, there's all these teams out there that have these 5-6 coaches, and they're this big collaboration with a bunch of IFBB pros and some big name coach at the top that they want $800 a month, and you're not really getting any real attention. I think there's a happy medium. There's people out there that are highly qualified that are going to give you one-on-one. They're going to give you personalized planning and check-ins. They're going to, give you the attention you deserve and that you're paying for. But you got to be careful, because some of these big names, as a regional nobody, you're just another one of the 80 people that are paying them so they can work with their pros and really prioritize other, people on their roster. And I'm not saying that's all big names. I'm just saying be careful of the big name that maybe has 5, 6, 7 people working under them. And some people have great levels of success with that, but it's just not my thing. The acquisition process is my next thing. So if a coach is sliding into your DMs poaching, one, it speaks volumes about their integrity. A good coach in this industry is hard to come by, and typically they have clients going to them. Their mastery is very, very well known, and their work is wonderful, and everybody wants to work with that person. So if a coach is sliding in your DMs, especially if they're bad mouthing your current coach, then I would run. I'd block that person. It's just a bad sign. These coaches that are constant poachers, they never seem to have good client rosters. They never seem to have good retention. Most of the time, they're sleeping with their clients. It's just a bad look, and it's just a bad personality archetype. And a good coach would never slide in your DM saying, "Well, Johnny is really bad at prepping you. You know, what are you taking? Oh, I would never do that. Oh, I can make you look way better than that." It's just, that's a level of insecurity that you don't want in a coach. And the next thing is blindly following a coach is another big mistake a lot of people make. You know, it is important that you pick a coach that you trust, but at the end of the day, you are your own advocate. So you should be researching everything that you're putting in your body. You should be very aware of the side effects. You should be very aware of common dosages, common durations, how these cycles might be designed commonly. And if something feels or doesn't feel great, or something feels like it's off, you need to speak up for yourself. Because at the end of the day, even coaches with good intentions, they need you to communicate. And a good coach, when you communicate, "Hey, I'm taking this thing and this thing is happening," is going to be concerned. They're going to seek a solution. You know, whereas the other coaches out there that give you the trust the process answer, fuck the process. I hate that answer. If a coach can't explain to you why he's doing something, and the answer could be, "I don't know." There's plenty of times where, you know, I've had coaches that have just thrown 700 grams of carbs in the plan that day and they just wanted to see what happened. They want to build data. There might not be a tangible answer. But saying "I don't know" is way better than saying "trust the process." And usually someone who excessively uses "trust the process" doesn't really know what the process is. They're just bullshitting their way through it. Or they're really bright and they just don't prioritize you. They don't think you're worth their time. Granted, on the flip side, you got to be careful, right? Because these coaches generally have pretty good intentions. A lot of them are good people with great skill sets. You don't want to be a nagging client either. If you're asking 30 questions a check-in, especially stuff that can be found on Google, then the problem lies in you. But if every couple months, every so often, something comes up that doesn't smell right and you inquire, that coach should take the time to answer your question, you know, thoughtfully and thoroughly, and not bullshit or try to deflect. So the other thing on that same type of subject is cookie cutter plans. Now, I've seen this happen a lot with these bigger name coaches, but a lot of these guys are copying and pasting plans. You know, I've been in a local gym recently where several clients on the same team had the same training program. And that's just not the way to be. If a coach is using AI for a lot of their stuff, if they're writing cookie cutter plans, if it's very obvious that a lot of this is automated and it's not personalized, that's not the kind of coach you want to work with. Training plans could not be cookie cutter. Your physique is different than your friend's physique. Your needs, your personality, or your personal quirks and your body issues, whether you have bad elbows or bad knees, or you need more lats and that person needs more delts, like training plans should be very personalized. And if they're copy and paste, run. The other thing that a lot of people don't see as red flags are the whole coach over promising. And you know, it's a slippery slope, because you want a coach to believe in you, but you also want a coach to keep it real with you. And if you are a first time competitor and this coach is telling you you're going to turn pro, like we're going to do this, all this stuff, you're going to do, you know, you're going to win this show, then I would be very cautious. It's just, there's so much to the sport. You know, Nick Walker could show up to the next regional show locally, or his, you know, his long lost cousin, and there's no way to control any of that stuff. And at the end of the day, a coach that's going to pump you up, you know, in a way that isn't accurate or tangible is just not a good personality to be in alignment with. You want that coach to give it to you real all the time, and sometimes it's not what you want to hear. You know, I remember on more than one occasion, I've had coaches that have just told me, "Hey, you're not ready for this. You know, you're not there yet," or like, you know, "You're probably not going to win this," or, you know, it's just, if they're lying to you and just trying to pump your ego, they're likely just trying to keep you paying them, because a lot of people don't take negative advice well, or negative, feedback well. And a lot of coaches are so infatuated with getting paid month to month. And granted, it's a job. I want to see everybody get paid. But at the end of the day, if they're afraid to give you negative feedback because they're afraid you might leave them and the dollar is more important than the process to them, then again, you should probably be running. Other things to be wary of is long response times, especially in prep. 24 hours to me is the max. If a coach isn't getting back to you in 24 hours, go find another coach. You're not a priority to them. It does not take long to go through a check-in. You're paying them your hard-earned money. This is really important to you. They owe you the respect to get back to you. I've been lucky enough to work with coaches that were really good at that. My last coach would get back to me within like a half hour, which I think is unreal. A lot of credit there. But 24 hours I think is fair. That coach should not be making you wait 4 or 5, 6 days. Especially, you can have problems at any given time, be waiting on a response. So 24 hours for me is the max. Also be careful of coupon code shills. If your coach is trying to jam supplements up your ass, peptides up your ass, and granted, we hire a coach because we want them to take us to our goal in the most, linear way imaginable. A lot of times that involves, suggestion of supplements or PEDs or peptides or what have you. And I don't have a problem with that, but there is a very fine line between that and trying to push things down your throat for financial benefit. And there are a lot of coaches that, they're coming on real hard with, I want you to buy from this place, I want you to use my code. And then some of them are even trying to get you to promote their supplement lines as part of their team. And granted, every coach I've ever had, and even coaches that I don't work with anymore, I try to support their codes. If they treated me well, I placed an order the other day and I used one of my old coach's codes. I think that's a nice gesture. It's a good thing to do. But there is a big difference between, I need protein, this protein tastes good, so I might as well just hook my coach up and use the code, with him writing you 17, 18, 20 lines of peptides you need to order for $3,000 and use his code or else. Those are two completely different circumstances. So, most importantly, above all else, red flags are, be careful of reckless PED protocols. At the end of the day, people are dying. We have a lot of risk when entering this sport, and you should know it. It's not a safe, sport overall. There's a lot of risks. We hope that they're calculated. We hope that things go a certain way. But that is really dependent on you and your research and your coach and everything synergistically working well as a system. You should know, before you take something, everything about it, like I discussed earlier, and your coach should be writing you protocols that make sense. If those protocols are wild, as a coach I'm not going to name in my region up in the Northeast was putting females on literally hundreds of milligrams of PEDs that looked more like male cycles, you should know as a client that is excessive. And you know what, at the end of the day, I am not a big fan of seeking advice from other people when you've taken the time to hire a coach. But if something feels unsafe, your safety is the priority every single time. If you're a female and taking 400 milligrams of test doesn't sound like the right idea, because it's not, ask your friend. Ask them if that sounds wrong, right or wrong. Get an opinion from someone you trust, because at the end of the day, you have to live with this body long after bodybuilding is over, long after you depart or from this coach. So you have to live with what you're doing to yourself now. So if the PED protocols are excessive and this coach doesn't take no for an answer, and you say, hey, look, I really want to have children, I don't want to do PEDs, I want to do the show naturally, and this coach is trying to jam PEDs down your throat, you should run. No means no. And at the end of the day, a coach, while they should be able to give you their advice, they should be able to lead, they should also be considering first and foremost your needs and your health and your journey. So if your goal is, you want to have children this year and you don't want to take these types of risks, then they should respect that. if you say, hey, I know I'm not going to do good at this national show, but, I really want to do it for X, Y, or Z, that coach might be able to say, hey, look, I don't think that you're ready for this, but, let's talk about it. It shouldn't always be a my way or the highway. I've heard some particular, instances where, a client wanted to do something and the coach just immediately said, nope, you're not competing this year, or you're not competing for 2 years. And, I think at the end of the day, it's important for a coach to be able to tell you that, hey, this is not what I suggest, but let's come up with something. And, at the end of the day, it's a team effort, and it's not, their goals that they're pursuing, it's yours. So, while a coach should be able to say, hey, Peter, you're 3 weeks out and this just isn't the show, your body is not cooperating, let's pick another one, that's completely reasonable. But at the same time, the client has a voice, and that needs to be considered. So if your coach is just not listening to you, pulling the trust the process bullshit, not accepting your answer as no, then you should probably seek another coach. So I hope you guys found this insightful. This has just been something that's been burning my ass lately. Like I mentioned earlier, there's just too many online coaches out there, too many, girls that did one bikini show and now they're a prep coach, that are prescribing PEDs, they're, getting people into bodybuilding competitions, and the outcomes have very frequently, as of late, been real ugly. So while a lot of times I really do side with coaches, I have a lot of friends that are great coaches. So I don't want this to come off as though there aren't great coaches out there. I want you guys to utilize this information and put money in the pocket of the good coaches, the ones that are going to take care of you, the ones you can have long-standing relationships with. And also, a little shout out to Andrew Berry, who just launched a coaching platform. It's called RateMyCoach.biz. And he just launched it yesterday, the day before, and I thought it was perfect timing to give that a shout out, because it is an awesome platform to be able to go on and read about other people's experience with coaches, positive and negative. And there's no other resource like that currently. So, you can check Instagrams, you can check client, testimonials, but you can also just literally read reviews now on coaches. So thanks, Andrew, for throwing that out there. And I hope you guys have a great time searching for your new coach, and you do all the appropriate research and have a killer season upcoming. So hope you all like this. Leave some comments, like, share, subscribe, and appreciate you greatly.